All right. Good afternoon, everybody. I'm hoping you guys are having a good Thursday. Going to go over the way to craft the body paragraph for this rhetorical analysis essay on Alfred M. Green's speech to his fellow African Americans about joining the fight for the Civil War. If you're a little unclear as to kind of what I'm referencing, you can refer to the slides from yesterday. And hopefully, that kind of clarifies everything. So I'm going to this will be brief. I'm thinking maybe 10 minutes. And then, that should at least get you to the point where you feel comfortable enough to craft body paragraph 2, body paragraph 3, and then a short conclusion to then upload into the AP classroom. So I'm going to take you through my screen now and just kind of show you what I would do when I get to the body paragraphs here. So, all right, here we go. Let's get my stuff together. All right, so again, I will upload this as well, this document. But again, this is the speech. This was the context, that we went through yesterday. Everything that's highlighted is sort of, what I indicated as being important. These were the questions I ask as I read. So I'll just kind of put this here as I read quickly. And as you probably saw, I posted a video today that hopefully you guys have seen or are about to watch. That basically the woman who runs AP College Board, or one of the women who partners with them, suggested 3 minutes to read the context, break it down, understand the rhetorical situation, just kind of like we did yesterday. Take your notes, make kind of points just within the context that are really going to matter for the rest of your essay. And then about 7 minutes to read the actual text. And I know that doesn't seem like a lot of time, but within those 7 minutes, you are constantly going back to these questions of where do I find moments of persuasion, for whatever the message is, right? Like whatever my message is going to be, where do I find moments that connect to that? What is a reference that's being made to connect to that? Is there a certain phrasing or word choicing that connects to the message or purpose of the speech? And that's sort of what we did yesterday, was taking it through here. So I'm going to go back over my intro briefly. We'll talk about a body paragraph. Again, with the introduction, I think of it as 2 major parts that you should be writing for your introduction. And these are short. These are, 3 sentences, maybe 3 or 4 sentences tops. But we'll kind of talk about what matters. You could only have this. You could only have a thesis statement. But, to make it stronger and just to kind of give yourself more wiggle room for points, it would be wise to include some discussion of the rhetorical situation in your intro, which makes sense, right? You're sort of giving introduction to, here's what the speech is about. So here's who it was, here's who the audience was, the message, the purpose, right? The exigence and the context, right? Now, you might not get to all of these within the intro. You might not hit every single one. That's okay. Definitely critical, though, to discuss who the speaker is, what the audience is, the message, and the purpose. If you can get to some exigence and context, that's good. But really, like these are the major things that we got to make sure that we hit as much as we can. So here's our intro. Patriotism is the idea that an individual will fight and defend their country no matter what, right? That's just my universal truth. It's just a very blanketed general statement about what it means to be a patriot and, what it means to stand for one's country. Now I'm getting into my rhetorical situation for the speech. Alfred M. Green was an African-American who spoke to fellow African-Americans in April 1861. At this time, African-Americans were not able to join the fight for their freedoms, yet Green spoke to them to encourage their participation nonetheless. So in just 2 sentences, I hit everything. I hit who my speaker is. I hit who he's speaking to. I hit the exigence, like why is he talking to them? And I hit the context, because it's important to understand, or for the readers to understand of your essay, okay, it's April 1861. So what? Big deal. Well, it matters because the Civil War is going on. But the ironic part is that African Americans are not allowed to enlist and fight for the North and the Union in order to gain their freedom. So that is important information that has to be said, and that's why I added that to my introduction here. And then we get into the yellow part, which is the most important part of your intro by far, which is the thesis. What's the speaker? What's the message? What's the purpose? And what are the strategies or devices, right? And when I say like strategies, I mean like by referencing, by bringing up, by talking about, by discussing, right? And devices would be more things like ethos, logos, pathos, repetition, allusion, imagery, right? Figurative language, metaphor. It doesn't matter which one you use. It's just all about how are you discussing how those pieces to his or her speech connect to their message and purpose. So I think everyone can start their theses this way: by referencing blank, by using blank, by bringing up blank, by discussing blank, right? I think you can use that for all of them. So I'm going to talk about by referencing patriotic language, empathizing with the past, and referencing God. Those are my three strategies. Green effectively persuades his African Americans, let's put his fellow African Americans, to join the Union Army in the Civil War fight. Just edit it that way, right? So now I've hit this. These are the things that he's using, right? This is the first part here. Here's what he's using, and then here's why he's using it to try to convince them and persuade them to join the fight. Okay, so that was yesterday. Now today is really just about the body paragraph. So every body paragraph, you have to clearly discuss what is a strategy or device that's being used. So this is why with the thesis statement, kind of giving your three examples, it should break it down for you. So patriotic language, that'll be the one that I'm going to focus on today because that's the first one. And that would leave you with empathizing with the past and referencing God. And when I mean emphasizing with the past, I mean like, talking about the struggles that he already knows that African Americans have faced in the past and not getting their due. And why does that matter? So the strategies first. And then it's all about, well, why is this effective to convey the message? Why is patriotic language effective to persuade his fellow African Americans to join the fight? And then what is it about the rhetorical situation that makes use of this strategy or device effective? So what is it about the fact that, it's 1861 and the Civil War is going on? Why does that matter to use patriotic language? Why does it matter that, the war, they need soldiers? Why does it matter that, he's an African American who can't fight and he's also speaking to them as African Americans who are not allowed to enlist? Why does all this matter? That's what you want to constantly be going back to in your body paragraphs, as well as what lines of evidence, pieces and phrases, right? We're not using whole lines here. Effectively communicate this message. So I'm going to take you through kind of all that in the next 5 minutes here. And then, you guys can take the next two body paragraphs plus a short conclusion from there. So if I'm talking about patriotic language, I might just start off by saying one method that Green employs to deliver his message is the use of patriotic language in his speech. Okay, boom. So I've already hit this, right? So boom, I'm done with this. I've just talked about the strategy or device that's being used. Pretty basic, pretty standard. Now I want to think about, let's actually move this up here. Now I want to think about what are the lines or evidence or phrases that effectively communicate this message? Why is this effective to convey this message? So I want to bring up a little bit of the background to this. Given that it is the first month of the Civil War, it is critical that Green leans on this kind of language to motivate these men to join. Right. And then I'm going to kind of explain, well, why is that critical? So I'm going to get into some pieces of evidence here. So I'm going back to some patriotic language. And there are some kind of key words in the first one here that he says, where he's talking about the time has arrived in the history of the Great Republic when we may again give evidence to the world of the bravery and patriotism of a race in whose hearts burns for the love of country, freedom, and of civil and religious toleration. So to me, it's like he's calling them out as like, we are a brave race, we are a patriotic race, this is what we do. So it's this idea of like reminding them who they are. So I'm going to just kind of use that as a piece and say, Green reminds his fellow African Americans that, and I'm just going to try to see how I can weave, and I'm again apologize for this, how they, and I'm going to say carry, quote, the bravery and patriotism of a race, that they, quote, carry the bravery and patriotism of a race that needs to be had for this Civil War victory. Okay, boom. That's my way of kind of weaving in the evidence. All right, so now I've kind of hit that. I'm actually going to switch this because this is kind of like the order that I'm going in. So really, I'm thinking about like evidence is maybe coming second. Doesn't have to go this way. You know, your evidence can kind of go anywhere, but I think this is traditionally how we're used to doing it, with a topic sentence, a little bit of context, and then evidence, and then we get into our analysis here, the whys and the what about the situation makes it important. So I've done this here, right? So I've kind of weaved that in. I might even go on to just add another piece just to kind of be really fancy. And say, you know, he goes on to say how he knows that his fellow brothers have shown true patriotism in the past and need to do so again. Okay, so I've used two pieces of evidence, which is pretty great. And now I want to go into, well, why is this effective for him ultimately trying to convince them? What is it about this language that makes it effective? So I'm going to go about this idea of the bravery and patriotism piece of a race. And I'm using complex sentence here because I have complex ideas. By using words such as bravery when describing his fellow African Americans, he is reminding them of the sheer power and courage that they all possess. Even though slavery is still existent, and I'm thinking, well, why does this matter? Even though slavery is still existent at this time, Green offers the reminder of the importance and influential power that African Americans have in this war. Like, he doesn't want them to like just think, oh, well, you know, this isn't going to affect us, and we're, you know, slavery still exists, and yeah, we might be freedmen in the North, but I think that he's going into this and saying, like, we are a brave race. Like you kind of stand for your race. It puts some pressure on them. It kind of gives them some importance. So I'm going to say, like, this puts an emphasis that these men represent not only their race, but their country. And so if he's saying that they're such brave men, then that is going to, push them into it, right? And if they are true patriots, then they will need to fight. These words force his audience, right? So how does it impact the audience? To consider whether they are truly brave and committed to their country, thus leading them to be persuaded to join in this fight that they currently aren't allowed to be part of. All right, so this is not a perfect paragraph by any means, right? I'm actually going to bring this down here so we can kind of see this. But I think it accomplishes everything, okay? And that was maybe 7 minutes with some explaining. But let's see if I discuss what strategy is being used. Do I have some evidence, pieces or phrases that communicate the message? And let's say the message that the author is going for. Do I discuss why it is effective, why, and when I say are these strategies, why, let me say, why is this strategy? Why is this strategy effective to convey the message? And what about the rhetorical situation makes use of this? So let's see if I do it right. One method that Green employs to deliver his message is the use of patriotic language in his speech. Boom. Okay, so that's my first one. Given that this is the first month of the Civil War, it's critical that Green leans on this kind of language to motivate these men to join, right? That's part of my rhetorical situation, right? That's the context of this. So I'm referencing that again. Green reminds his fellow African Americans that they, quote, carry the bravery and patriotism of a race that needs to be had for the Civil War victory. He goes on to say how he knows that his fellow brothers have shown, quote, true patriotism in the past and need to do so again. There's my evidence. So now I want to break it down. What is it about using patriotic language that will persuade them to get into this war? So now let's see if I do this. By using words such as bravery when describing his fellow African Americans, he's reminding them of the sheer power and courage that they all possess. Even though slavery still exists at this time, Green offers the reminder of the importance and influential power that African Americans have in this war, I'm going to say, and in this country, just to kind of, make it a little stronger. This puts an emphasis that these men represent not only their race, but their country. These words force his audience to consider whether they are truly brave and committed to their country, thus leading them to be persuaded to join in the fight that they currently aren't allowed to be part of, right? And boom, that's it. So I've kind of, now I say boom, that's it, because I did it kind of quickly, but I have complex sentences, right? Even though da 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 da, comma, by using da 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 da, comma, right? So I have complex sentences that put together complex ideas, but I'm constantly going back to this. Why does this strategy work for his message? And then what is it about the rhetorical situation? And when I'm saying that, again, what is it about the speaker or the audience or the context, kind of that matters to this? So the fact that the war just started, it matters that he's using patriotic language to motivate them. The fact that it's 1861 and slavery still exists and he's talking to African Americans, that matters, right? And so I've got to make use of that in my analysis, and this is how I conveyed it here, okay? So that is how I would break down this body paragraph, and your jobs now would be to break down the other two. And again, I'm not suggesting maybe you copy this word for word. I suggest that you try to write your own, still using this though, still using patriotic language. So reference mine, look at mine, but see if there's different patriotic language that he uses here or different analysis that you could use there. If you don't want to use mine, totally fine. Just change the thesis statement. So instead of patriotic language, use something else. But then I am going to ask that you guys use empathizing with the past and referencing God as these pieces. And referencing the past, again, is kind of found in the middle, the deeds of the fathers, the great injustices, things like that. But if you want to use something else for the first body, please, 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 by all means. I just want to just show you this as a model on how to craft this, okay? And when you finish, or I'm sorry, as you're going to get started, the information can be found right here. So it says Rhetorical Analysis Prep, Alfred M. Green speech. All right, you would click on it, and it should be assigned to everybody here. And then when you start it, you're going to have 45 minutes. Okay, so this is the speech. You don't necessarily even need to read the speech here because I'm going to post this Word document that has the entire speech here that we broke down yesterday. But I suggest that when you click on it and you're ready to go, you've got your ideas organized, because when 45 minutes starts and stops, when it starts, you can't, you can't pause it. You can't come back to it. Like it's going to go. So make sure you have your ideas organized, and then of course just click submit. Be mindful of grammar, be mindful of punctuation, be mindful of capitalization, all these pieces kind of as you submit. Okay. So that's that. I went a little bit longer than I planned, but I hope that gives you a breakdown on kind of how to do the body paragraphs, how to organize them, and then so you feel confident about completing those for tomorrow night. All right. Let me know if you have any questions. Hope this was helpful, and I'll talk to you all later.